welcome to your deep dive. Today, we're going to crack open a text that kind of blends psychology and philosophy and even a little bit of linguistics.
Yeah, it's a fascinating read.
It is a little bit of head scratcher, though.
It is. It is.
That's why you've got us.
Right. We'll break it down.
Yeah, we've distilled it down to the most thought-provoking bits.
It really makes you re-examine some of the assumptions that we have about human behavior.
Oh,
Like one of the arguments that it makes is that our actions aren't just reactions to the world around us, but they're driven by this deep need for equilibrium, for balance.
so like instead of us just being blown about by like every little thing,
Right.
we're kind of like ships with this like self-correcting mechanism, always trying to stay on course or something.
Exactly. Yeah, you've got it. And this idea of equilibrium is kind of woven through the entire text.
Okay.
And it even influences how the text approaches analysis itself. It introduces this concept called differential thinking.
Oh, differential thinking.
Yeah.
Does that have anything to do with calculus? Because if so, I might need like a little bit of a refresher.
No calculus needed.
All right.
It's more about shifting your perspective.
Okay.
So instead of getting bogged down in the why of things, like why did this happen? Why did I do that?
Right.
It encourages you to focus on the how.
How? Okay.
How did events unfold? What were the specific steps and interactions involved?
So instead of kind of like getting stuck in the past, replaying the why over and over again like a broken record, you're saying this differential thinking helps you to move forward.
Yes, by understanding the process.
By understanding the process. Okay, interesting. So how can we apply this like in real life?
Well, let's say you're dealing with a frustrating project at work.
Okay.
By shifting your focus to the specific actions, the decisions that led to the current situation, you can gain a much clearer understanding of what went wrong and how to improve for next time.
Oh, so instead of being kind of paralyzed by the why,
Right.
you're empowered to kind of take action.
Precisely.
That's really useful. I can already see how that could help me avoid some of those mental why spirals that I get caught in sometimes.
Yeah.
It's like switching from a blame mindset to a problem-solving mindset.
Exactly. And this focus on the how actually reflects a bigger idea in the text, which is the importance of understanding the human organism as a whole.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about this whole organism idea.
Well, it really pushes back against that old mind-body split.
Okay.
It's saying that we can't truly understand human behavior by separating our thoughts and emotions from our physical bodies.
Oh, so it's all interconnected.
Everything is interconnected.
Are we talking about like the mind-body connection, like how stress can manifest as physical symptoms?
That's one way to think about it, but it goes even deeper.
Yeah, great.
It's arguing that all human behavior, our thoughts, feelings, and actions are all ultimately driven by this organism's need to maintain equilibrium.
Right, that balance.
That balance that we were talking about earlier. It's like our mind and body are constantly working together to create this sense of internal balance.
Okay, so I'm starting to see how this all connects.
Yeah.
So we're driven by this need for equilibrium, and this differential thinking helps us maintain that balance
Right.
by focusing on the how instead of getting lost in the why.
Yeah.
But what does all this have to do with how we see the world?
That's a great question, and it leads us to another fascinating aspect of this text.
Okay.
It's the exploration of how our needs actually shape our perception of reality.
Wait, are you saying that what we see as real is actually filtered through our own needs?
It is.
Whoa, that's like a mind-blowing concept.
Yeah.
I never really thought about it that way.
Think of it this way. Imagine a simple field.
Okay.
A farmer, an artist, a real estate developer, they're all going to look at that field and see something different.
Oh, right. Yeah.
The farmer sees potential for crops. The artist sees beauty and inspiration. The developer sees dollar signs.
Yeah, and they all want something different from that field.
Right. Their needs and their interests shape what they notice and how they interpret what they see.
That makes so much sense. It's like when you're hungry, suddenly every restaurant sign seems to just jump out at you.
Right.
It's not that the signs weren't there before.
Right.
It's just that your need for food is highlighting them for you.
Exactly.
That's really interesting.
And the text argues that this happens on a much broader scale.
Mm-hmm.
Our needs for security, connection, belonging, meaning they're all influencing how we perceive the world, even if we're not consciously aware of it.
So this is really making me question everything I thought I knew about reality.
Yeah.
If our needs are shaping how we see the world, does that mean that we're all essentially living in our own little bubbles of perception?
That's a great question, and it's something that we'll delve deeper into.
Okay.
as we continue our deep dive.
I can't wait.
But before we go there, let's explore another layer of this text,
Okay.
one that ties in directly with this idea of needs shaping reality. It's all about how we protect ourselves from discomfort and how we avoid situations that threaten our equilibrium.
Okay, now that is something I think we can all relate to.
Right.
Like, we've all got those little avoidance techniques we use to kind of keep ourselves feeling safe and comfortable.
Exactly, and the text explores these avoidance mechanisms in detail,
Okay.
showing how they can range from, like, simple physical withdrawal to complex psychological maneuvers like projection and denial.
So it's not just about physically avoiding things. It's also about how we mentally and emotionally shield ourselves from discomfort.
Precisely. And while these avoidance mechanisms can provide temporary relief,
Sure.
the text argues that they can also create this kind of restrictive reality, preventing us from experiencing the fullness of life and reaching our true potential.
Yeah, it's like building walls around yourself to keep out the bad stuff, but you end up blocking out all the good stuff too.
That's a perfect analogy. And the text challenges us to examine our own avoidance patterns,
Okay.
to consider what we might be missing out on by clinging to those comfort zones.
This is already giving me a lot to think about. I'm starting to wonder what my own avoidance patterns might be and how they might be shaping my reality without me even realizing it.
That's the beauty of these deep dives.
Right.
They help us see ourselves and the world with fresh eyes,
Yeah.
questioning assumptions and uncovering these hidden patterns.
I like that.
And believe me, this is just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more to explore in this text, including some pretty controversial ideas about the nature of good and evil.
Ooh. Okay, now you've really got my attention.
Ah,
I can't wait to dive into that.
we'll get there.
But first, I think we need a moment to process all of this. I'm already feeling like I've taken a crash course in a whole new way of seeing the world.
It's a lot to take in, for sure.
Yeah.
But remember, we're in this together. We'll break down these complex ideas step by step and explore how they can help you navigate your own life with greater awareness and understanding.
Okay.
So buckle up, because this deep dive is about to get even more fascinating.
Okay. I'm ready. Welcome back to our deep dive. Last time we were exploring some pretty mind-bending concepts like differential thinking and how our needs can actually shape our perception of reality.
It's really all about understanding the human being as this complex system that's always trying to maintain some sense of balance and making sense of the world through the lens of their needs.
Right. It's like we're not just passively observing reality, we're actively creating it based on what we need and what we're trying to avoid.
And that actually brings us to a point where this text gets a little bit controversial.
Oh, okay.
It actually takes aim at one of the giants of psychology, Freud.
Ooh, Freud.
Specifically, it challenges his concept of repression.
Okay, so what does this text have against repression? I mean, isn't that like a pretty fundamental idea in psychology?
Well, it argues that Freud may have overemphasized repression as the driving force behind neuroses,
Okay.
instead of these unacceptable urges being stuffed down into some dark corner of the unconscious.
Right.
This text suggests kind of a different way of understanding avoidance.
Okay, I'm all ears.
Yeah.
How does this text redefine avoidance?
It frames avoidance as a more active and dynamic process. So remember that need for equilibrium we talked about?
Yes.
This text suggests that avoidance is a way for us to maintain that balance by steering clear of anything that might trigger discomfort or threaten our sense of self.
So it's less about things being buried deep down and more about us consciously or unconsciously making choices to avoid situations that make us feel anxious or uncomfortable.
Exactly. And this shift in perspective actually has some pretty big implications for how we understand and approach mental health.
Okay, how so?
Well, instead of digging into the past to unearth these repressed memories,
Right.
therapy should really focus on helping people become more aware of their present moment avoidance patterns
Oh, okay.
and developing healthier ways to cope with discomfort.
That makes a lot of sense. It's more empowering, too.
Yeah,
You're not a prisoner of your past. You actually have the power to make different choices in the present.
that's a great way to put it. So are you ready to delve into another fascinating and perhaps slightly unsettling concept from this text?
Bring it on. Feeling brave. What do we got?
Okay, well, it introduces this idea of the paranoid character.
The paranoid character.
And before you get too alarmed,
Okay.
it's important to note that the text isn't using paranoid in a clinical sense, like diagnosing someone with paranoia.
Okay, so we're not talking about like full-blown delusions here.
No, not necessarily. It's more about describing a certain character structure,
Okay.
a way of perceiving and interacting with the world that can manifest in a variety of ways.
So what are the hallmarks of this paranoid character? What makes them tick?
Okay, well, at the core, it's really about a heightened sensitivity to threat.
The threat. Right.
So someone with this character structure might have a tendency to interpret the actions of others as hostile or malicious, even when there's no real evidence to support that.
Hmm. So they're kind of constantly on guard looking for signs of danger or betrayal.
It can be. It can be.
Wow, that sounds exhausting. Like they're living in a perpetual state of fight or flight.
It can be. And this kind of hypervigilance can lead to a whole cascade of defense mechanisms, suspicion,
Yeah.
mistrust projection,
Wow.
even hostility towards others as a way to preemptively protect themselves.
This is making me think about how easily we can kind of demonize people or groups that we see as different or threatening. Could this paranoid character dynamic be at play in those situations?
That's a really insightful connection, and it's something that this text really encourages us to consider.
Huh.
It suggests that this tendency to project our own anxieties and aggression onto others
Yeah.
is actually a deeply ingrained human response to a perceived threat.
So it's not necessarily about like inherent evil or bad intentions.
Right.
It's more about fear kind of driving our behavior.
That's the key point. This text challenges us to look beyond those surface judgments of good and evil
Right.
and really try to understand the underlying motivations behind human behavior.
Oh,
Yeah, what are people's needs? What are they afraid of? What are they trying to protect?
That's a powerful shift in perspective.
Yeah,
It encourages empathy and understanding, even in those really challenging situations.
absolutely. But I'm curious, how does this paranoid character develop in the first place?
Yeah.
Is it something we're born with, or is it shaped by our experiences?
Right. Nature versus nurture.
That's a great question, and it's something the text addresses directly.
Okay.
It argues that this character structure isn't innate. It's a pattern that emerges from early experiences, particularly those where our basic needs for connection, security, or love weren't consistently met.
So if a child grows up in an environment where their needs are neglected or they experience trauma,
Right.
they might develop this kind of hypervigilance as a way to cope and protect themselves.
Exactly. Imagine a child who repeatedly reaches out for connection, but is met with rejection or indifference.
Yeah.
Over time, that child might start to see the world as a hostile place and develop this distrustful, guarded approach to relationships.
That's heartbreaking, but it also makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
If your early experiences teach you that the world isn't safe, you're going to build up defenses to protect yourself.
Right.
But this raises another question. If these patterns are so deeply ingrained, can they be changed?
That's the million-dollar question, and it's something that we'll explore in the final part of our deep dive.
Okay.
But I can tell you this.
Hmm.
This text offers a glimmer of hope.
Good.
It suggests that while these character structures can be really deeply rooted, they're not fixed or unchangeable.
Okay.
With self-awareness and the right tools, it's actually possible to shift these patterns and create more fulfilling relationships.
That's encouraging. So it sounds like we've got a lot to unpack in the next part of this deep dive.
You do.
What can our listener expect as we wrap up this exploration?
Well, we'll delve into some specific techniques for disrupting those avoidance patterns and cultivating greater self-awareness. And we'll also explore the text's perspective on mental health and what it sees as the ultimate goal of therapy.
It sounds like we're about to get into the really practical and empowering stuff.
We are.
I'm excited to keep going. Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive. So far, we've covered a lot of ground, from questioning traditional psychological theories to exploring how our needs and fears can shape our perceptions and behaviors.
It's been quite a journey. But now let's talk about what we can actually do with all this knowledge. How can we apply these insights to live more fulfilling lives?
That's the question I'm most curious about. Does this text offer any practical tools for shifting those ingrained patterns and breaking free from those avoidance mechanisms?
It does, absolutely. And one of the most intriguing techniques it highlights is something called concentration therapy, which was developed by Wilhelm Reich.
Concentration therapy. It sounds pretty intense. What's the basic idea behind it?
Well, it involves turning your attention inward and focusing on the physical sensations in your body.
Okay.
It's about becoming deeply aware of your breath, your muscles, any tension or tightness you might be holding.
So it's not about talking through your problems. It's more about tuning into your body's signals.
Exactly. The idea is that by paying really close attention to your physical sensations, you can start to identify and release the muscular tension that often accompanies emotional distress.
It's like our bodies are holding on to the emotional baggage we're trying to avoid.
That's a great way to put it. And as you start to release that physical tension, you also begin to loosen the grip of those deeply ingrained avoidance patterns. It's like creating space for new possibilities, new ways of being.
I'm sensing a connection here to mindfulness practices. Is that accurate?
There's definitely an overlap. Both mindfulness and concentration therapy encourage us to be present in the moment, but concentration therapy has this specific focus on the physical body and the sensations we're experiencing.
So instead of trying to push away those uncomfortable feelings, we're actually leaning into them, experiencing them in our bodies.
That's the key. It's about developing a greater tolerance for discomfort and learning to kind of ride those waves of emotion rather than getting swept away by them.
It sounds challenging, but also incredibly empowering. If we can learn to be with those uncomfortable feelings, we're not letting them dictate our choices anymore.
Exactly. And remember, this process isn't about achieving some kind of perfect emotional control.
Okay.
It's about cultivating self-awareness and compassion.
So it's okay to feel those difficult emotions. Sadness, anger, fear. It's what we do with them that matters.
That's a great takeaway.
Yeah.
Now, this text also explores the concept of the self, particularly in the context of neurosis. And it suggests that when we're caught in those cycles of avoidance, we can actually hinder the development of a strong, healthy sense of self.
Okay, so let's talk about the self.
Yeah.
It seems like such a fundamental idea, but it's also one that can be kind of hard to grasp.
Yeah.
How does this text define the self?
Think of it as that part of you that's capable of awareness, reflection, and conscious choice making. It's what distinguishes us from simply reacting to stimuli. It's the part of us that can observe our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors and make deliberate choices.
So it's like the CEO of our inner world, guiding our actions and shaping our experience.
I like that analogy. And the text argues that in neuresis, that CEO's power can get diminished. When we're constantly running from discomfort, we're not giving ourselves the space to cultivate self-awareness and agency.
It makes sense. It's like if the CEO is always hiding in their office, afraid to make tough decisions, the whole company suffers.
Exactly. And the text suggests that therapy can actually play a crucial role in helping people reclaim that sense of self. It's about empowering people to step into their full potential to live more authentically and make choices that align with their true values.
So it's not just about alleviating symptoms. It's about helping people create a richer, more fulfilling life.
That's a beautiful way to summarize it.
Yeah.
Now, before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to touch on one final point.
Okay.
The nature of mental health itself. This text actually challenges some of the conventional views on therapy and what it means to be mentally healthy.
Okay, I'm curious to hear more. What does it propose instead?
Well, it emphasizes this kind of holistic approach, recognizing that there's no one-size-fits-all solution. It moves away from the idea of simply fixing people and instead focuses on supporting them in their journey of growth and self-discovery.
So it's less about diagnosing and treating and more about empowering individuals to find their own path to well-being.
Exactly. And it also emphasizes the importance of the therapeutic relationship itself. It's about creating a safe and supportive space where individuals can really explore their inner world, challenge those limiting beliefs, and ultimately rewrite their own narratives.
This whole deep dive has been a journey of rewriting narratives, hasn't it?
It has.
From questioning conventional wisdom to exploring these new ways of understanding ourselves and the world around us.
It has, and I hope it's inspired our listener to embark on their own journey of exploration and self-discovery.
Absolutely. It's been a truly thought-provoking experience, and I have to say I'm walking away with a whole new appreciation for the complexity and resilience of the human spirit.
That's the beauty of these deep dives. They remind us that we're all works in progress, always evolving, always capable of growth and transformation.
And on that note, I think it's time for us to surface from this deep dive. But remember, the exploration doesn't end here. Keep questioning, keep learning, and keep diving deep into this fascinating world of human experience.
Until next time.